life is never a linear straight line. And when you're in the environments, there are curveballs, and we just had to deal with what the environment gave us. So, but again, it's this group that we had, the camaraderie, encouragement.
All right, welcome to the M26 Podcast. Today I'm joined by Chip, Harmon and Deepen, a few of the team members from our recent M26 Everest Base Camp trek. So welcome to the podcast, boys.
Happy to be here.
Thanks, Magnus.
Awesome. Right, to kick us off, let's just have a little chat about why. Why did you do base camp? What was the trigger for you?
Yeah, well, this was my second base camp trip. So I was doing this I was running camera. So taking the video, taking the photos for the company we went up with, Journey with Bernie and Chip now. But also, this was a bit of a training one for me because I really hope to do some actual team leadering and some trek leadering in the future. So this was a bit of a training exercise for me as well.
Awesome. What about you, Harmon?
Magnus, for me, it was more so, I just started getting into fitness a few months ago, and I just wanted to set a goal for myself that at least keeps me going, and, I start training for a particular goal. And me and Deepen randomly caught up for a drink at a pub, and Deepen asked, I'm going to base camp, would you come? And my answer was, why the fuck not? Let's go. So that was it. It just came out of the blue, and went home, paid up, and there we were.
Mate, awesome.
And Magnus, for me, this was definitely a bucket list item. And you actually asked me or told me that you were going to do it. And it took me like 2 seconds to just say, done, I'm in. And for me, I think, Everest was always that goal, that mental resilience, that physical challenge. And it was just a dream. So when you mentioned it, I just was happy to do it. The same with Harmon. I think, it was just the universe just aligned when you mentioned it. So it was, yeah.
Yeah, that was exactly the same for me. Like, definitely bucket list item, and thought, it's time for another challenge in my life. And opportunity arose and went, yep, let's have a crack. Alrighty, training. So let's have a bit of a chat about what sort of training that you guys completed to get yourself in the physical shape for the trek.
So for me, we basically started training probably 6 months before, and Harmon and I sort of joined pack and did a lot of Mount Cootha training, a lot of Kangaroo Point training. I did some physical training at my home gym, but definitely 6 months preparation prior to the trek.
Yeah, and you're a pretty fit boy, Chip. What about you, mate? Anything particular you train for?
Oh, well, I love weight training. I mean, that's just part of my life. I weight train 3-4 times a week. I didn't really change up anything. I didn't do anything specific. So I just kept on doing what I was doing. That's a full body workout over the course of that week. So everything's balanced, everything's in order. And yeah, just seemed to, and also can't overstate this enough. Got to eat right, because that's the foundation there too. Nutrition's the foundation.
I agree.
Yeah. No, yeah, well, I was very much the same as you guys. We bumped into each other a few times on those Kangaroo Point cliffs, those stairs, and also Mount Cootha. That was, and I actually got a PT involved as well, because I wanted to specifically just strengthen a few items that I felt I had a bit of a weakness in, and I'm no spring chicken, so I wanted to get as prepared as possible. So, all right, now let's jump into the actual trek itself. So, sorry, mate. What did you get up to?
With me, I have a dietitian and nutritionist that I've been working with for the last few months, because I wasn't in the best physical shape when I agreed to go to Everest Base Camp. So I had to. He put me on a special diet plan. So I lost around 6 kilos of weight during this training, trying to get back into shape, and we were doing treks with Deepen, going to Mount Cootha a few times, Kangaroo Point cliffs, but it was more drinking less, eating a bit more clean, and just generally, he was going for a walk and a run every day. But that really helped. But I had a period of around 2.5 months to prepare rather than 6, so I just had to sort of fast track the fitness journey. But yeah, it was well worth it.
How did you feel? Did you feel prepared when you went?
Yeah, absolutely. Was completely pumped, but I think even getting up, I was fine. It's just, the altitude sickness got me a bit later, but physically it was okay.
Yeah, no, mate, awesome. Okay, so for memory, we started off out of Kathmandu. Once we landed in there, spent a couple of days looking around the town. We jumped on a bit of a bus and headed off to Rumachump.
Yeah.
And that was because the flight from Kathmandu to Lukla wasn't available anymore. They wanted us to fly out of Rumachump. So let's have a bit of a chat about the bus trip. That was about 6.5 hours.
Yeah, it's long.
For memory.
Yeah, look, I actually love the bus trip. Just gave the ability to see a little bit of the natural scenery, destination A to destination B. We stopped along the way, had a bite to eat. So to me, to see the countryside was actually a bit of a highlight as part of the trip.
Yeah, with me, the bus ride was okay. Let's put it this way. There's a lot of difference between the Australian traffic and the traffic in Nepal, obviously. So I was focused on the road for most of the bus trip. So that was, a little bit uncomfortable at times. But apart from that, it was good. All of us were in the same bus. I was changing seats and, talking to different team members. So that was a good lot of time that we got to sit together and have a good chat. So for me, yeah, it was fine.
Yeah, I'm not in love with the long bus rides either, but, as Deep said, the scenery's nice. It's a good time to chat. The reason we should say, too, that you go to Ramachap is, so from Kathmandu, if you want to fly into Lukla, which is the gateway village, right, that's the one that takes you out to all the mountains. So you're going to need a good weather window of 90 minutes out of Kathmandu. If you leave from Ramachap, you only need half an hour. So that's the thinking there. So a lot of people do end up leaving from Ramachap.
Yeah, no, definitely love the camaraderie on the bus, love the scenery on the bus, but didn't love the bus. Not a fan of bus rides. But so we ended up in Rumachump. So let's have a walk through that, because that didn't go exactly according to plan, because we arrived there at about 6 p.m. and then the ideal exercise was we were going to fly out in the morning. So we got up. We got our bags packed, we had breakfast, and then we sat around for a bit.
I suppose it's one of those things in life. Life is never a linear straight line. And when you're in the environments, there are curveballs, and we just had to deal with what the environment gave us. So the opportunity to then take a helicopter ride, even though we were looking forward to that aeroplane ride to Lukla, and we've all watch the videos and the excitement and the intrepidation and the nervousness, but the helicopter ride itself was also quite enjoyable.
Yeah, and there was a bit of card playing going on.
Old card playing. Eh? Yeah, it's and that should tell you a lot too about the fact that we had to get that chopper, because you're always at the mercy of the weather when you're in Nepal, and we just couldn't get that window from Ramachap. So I reckon the chopper was definitely the right call. It was a great trip, and a really a chopper is just a really good way to see the scenery, isn't it?
It's amazing. So I think spending an extra day in Rumachap wasn't the best. I mean, Rumachap's no Vegas, put it this way. But it would have been nice if there was something more to do rather than just sitting around and playing cards. But as we all mentioned, we were at the mercy of the weather. So as soon as it cleared, yes, we wasted nearly 2 days. But the moment we got on the chopper, I was like, yes. Now, now the actual trip begins. But the ride from Ramachap to Surkhe, the chopper ride, was beautiful. So me sitting at the front of the chopper had a really good view. So I really enjoyed that.
It's one of the joys of being one of the smaller passengers.
Exactly.
Getting that front seat, and like you said, so that full day we just waited around, and then off to bed the next night, and we had Plan B in place that if that weather opportunity didn't open up on that second day, that we were going to jump into choppers. So made the way, little 500-metre wander down to the local Rumachap airport, which wasn't much chop either, but pretty excited, and that was one hell of a chopper ride into to Suke. So just to probably explain that. So we weren't, again, that window didn't open up and we weren't able to land in Lukla as planned. So being able to fly into Sukha. So Suke was actually, I think, Chip, correct me if I'm wrong, 400 metres, 600 metres lower in altitude than Lukla, which, is that correct?
Yep. So basically what that translates to into a bit of a climb right off the bat. That was, and because we didn't need to do that on my first trip, right? So that was a surprise to me as well. So that was, it was one of the toughest days right off the bat, that day one.
Yeah, and I distinctly remember flying into Suke, and it's not much of a town at all. For memory, there was, I think, 6 little one-bedroom little huts and one food place, and that was it. And a little bit of a paddock. And as we flew in, there was 5 helicopters on the ground, and we came in and landed. There was a few hundred people because there was no flights out of Lukla for the 6 days previous. So that place was heaving with people that just trekked down from Lukla, hoping to get a chopper ride back out. So we were actually fortunate that we could fly in, and I, again, was just surprised at the amount of people and how much that place was heaving.
Yeah, literally, there was choppers coming in and out. There was 5 coming in, 5 going. So literally every 5 minutes there was choppers coming in. It was very, very busy.
Yeah.
It was interesting to actually, people like us were going up the mountain. We met a lot of people coming down the mountain. Some of them were fit, some of them had oxygen tanks. So it was welcome to Everest,
Dropped right in it. Yeah.
It was a bit intimidating because when we reached Suke, we saw at least 2 to 3 people with oxygen cylinders and 2 of them limping around saying, if they've done, the one has done their shin, one has done their knee. I was like, wow, this is going to be fun.
Yeah. Shit got real, didn't it? Pretty
Oh,
quick.
God, yeah.
What was interesting is that, the theory is you get to Lukla and then you descend to acclimatize. And as you said, we were 600 meters further down and it's like, welcome to the track, start climbing.
Yeah, dropped right in it, Yeah.
The other thing I really noticed when we landed was just a temperature drop because it was quite warm in Ramatchup and we weren't blessed with any air conditioning in our accommodation. So that heat and that humidity and then flying in and then surrounded by all the mountains, like it was really surreal. And I just remember like, hey, we're here.
Yep.
Let's do this.
Absolutely.
So let's talk through that first day. So I think we set off at about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
12:30.
12:30.
So the expectation, and one thing that we learned with the Nepal track or the Nepalese, when you ask them how long and they say 3 hours, it's really 5 or 6 hours in, and nothing.
Yeah, you never can tell too, because sometimes they lowball you.
Nothing is on time, and so we fortunately some of us had torches, some of us didn't, and we weren't expecting a night walk. So that first day was about 6 hours. And it was quite a challenge.
Yeah,
and it also rained as well.
Light. Yeah, so we lost the light. It was raining. It was a big challenge, and it was a shame too because there's some beautiful scenery along there, and you're doing the treks for the scenery and for the views, So, yeah, it was not ideal being in the darkness, was it?
It wasn't ideal, but again, it's one of those things where you just take that curveball and you just cop it on the chin, just make the best out of it.
I quite enjoyed the first day, to be honest. I had in my mind that I'm really going to pace myself and, go at a steady, slow pace and eventually get there because that was the first day. Fitness-wise, I was feeling good. It was, the walk was good. But then when it started getting colder and then it started raining, it was dark and, you just don't know the terrain where you're walking. So there was a fair few variables there. But I actually enjoyed it. It was a decent 8-odd-hour track that we did that day. But, yeah, it was a few curveballs for sure.
No, definitely a few highlights there. And like you said, like Deeps was saying, you're trekking along and then it starts raining and you're thinking, how much further have we got to go? And then you check with the guides, an hour or two. And then an hour or two later, how long to go? Oh, an hour or two. And then, and then next thing you know, the sun drops and it's dark and only half of us had our headlights organised because we weren't expecting a night trip on that first one. And another real highlight for me, you guys might recall that one of our team members was really struggling, and we got in, and then we sat around, we were having dinner, and then an hour or two later, she rocked up, and big standing ovation, and so you guys remember that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, Joe had so much ticker, man. I mean, because, and not to, disparage her in any way, but she was really suffering, probably just from minute one, and she just never stopped pushing.
She never gave up.
It was inspiring. Yeah.
I think that also talks about the group as well. We all gave her so much inspiration, so much support. And Jo herself had that determination, but we really had an amazing group and a supportive group. And I think that also motivated her and kept her on track as well.
And certainly really supportive guides, because cheering's always going to be that, guys, hanging out at the back with the, quote unquote slowest members and doing the job.
Yeah. And the other thing I remember, because it was raining and because it was dark, we were all cold, we were all looking forward to, there's definitely hot showers. And I remember standing there quite cold with a towel wrapped around me, and the hot water's not coming out, and there wasn't going to be no hot water.
I remember that. And they said because hot water is basically all solar powered, and because it'd been raining and it's cloudy for the last 2 days, they said there is no hot water. I remember you standing right in the middle of the hallway with your towel. I was like, it's like 2 degrees outside. And that was quite the sight.
Welcome to base camp. Yeah. So day two, we were trekking from Pakding to Namche, and this was earmarked as one of the hardest days, wasn't it, Chip?
Yeah, well, because you're gaining about 670 vertical meters on that day. So it's a big climb, and it's the longest climb. I think, as we've spoken about, I personally don't find it the toughest day, just because you're not getting hammered by the altitude then. But I mean, I think just mentally, it's a very sort of indomitable thing to be facing sort of a potentially 6-hour ascent. So you really got to prep yourself mentally for that. But I mean, how did you guys find it actually?
See, me personally, I actually enjoyed that day too. I didn't find that was the hardest day. When we got to the Namche stairs, yes, that sort of takes a bit out of you. But until then, I think the views were brilliant. We were just, there was talks and banter along the way. We were having a mighty good time, but talking to other people. So I met plenty of people, some from England, some from America, other parts of the world. But I was really enjoying that. And that to me is when I'm trekking, it's not just all about the trek, it's about meeting people, sharing, your views with them. But which is a reason that just took my focus, and I had a bloody good day.
Yeah, there's real camaraderie on the trail, isn't there? Yeah.
Certainly a global trek, isn't it? There was just people from all around the world that you bump into every day, and those Namche stairs, we were all told about those, and I think we were looking forward to them. How did you find them, Deeps?
Man, I just find the body is an amazing vessel, because when you're so pumped and you're in a group and everyone's doing it, and you want to not be that person that doesn't complete it. The psyche of the trip actually just kept us going, and even the challenges of the Namche stairs, it was tough, without a doubt. But we all completed it. Yeah.
Actually, I remember I did struggle a little bit. I had a little bit of an accident, had a little bit of an upset stomach. So the boys may recall. So we won't get into that. But made it to Namche. Fair effort again. Awesome effort by all the group, and love that camaraderie. That something that I probably was one of the highlights for me. Just the way we all stuck together, the way we all encouraged each other, and if somebody was lagging behind a little bit, one of us would always drop back and hang back with them a little bit and have those conversations. And so Namche, that's the biggest town, isn't it, that we experience?
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely the pumping hub of the Everest Base Camp nightlife.
Indeed it is. I concur, and I will second that.
To talk to about that, let me tell you something. Can sniff out a good club and a good massage.
Absolutely. Well, we're on holiday, so yes,
you gotta
absolutely.
Do it.
I mean, I was trying my best. I was like, no, I'm going to trek. I need to be regimented. no drinks, you know. But then I thought, really, it is cold outside. One rum won't hurt. But that one rum that I had at one of the really nice fluid bar, it was called, when I fished that out, I was ready for another
They're
one.
a bit more,
but but yeah, I think out of the track, Namche was a bit of a highlight for me in terms of the number of restaurants they had, the cafes, and the Irish bar, and there's a few other bars there. But that, out of everything else that we visited along the track, that place was pumping, and people were friendly. So just sat down in a random club, chatted to strangers. So I really enjoyed that. However, the next day was a different story after a few drinks.
Walk us through that, Deeps. How was that acclimatisation day that we so Namche is 3,500 metres, and I think that acclimatisation day is 500 metres straight up to the Everest View Hotel.
Yeah, so look, I think as Chip sort of mentioned earlier, you don't feel that altitude until you hit that 3,500. So that first day or two, it was, call it cruisy a little bit. That acclimatization walk to Everest Hotel was challenging, definitely, because that's where you started walking a little bit slower, you started breathing a little bit more heavier. Harmon and I sort of had some drinks the night before. We promised ourselves to be good, but you've got to also have some fun as well.
Crack, don't you? Yeah. It's probably worth lingering on that too, because a lot of people don't know what the altitude kind of feels like. For me, altitude is a real breathlessness. You lose your breath a lot quicker, and I find for me it takes a lot longer to get that breath back. Is that what you guys experienced as well?
Yeah, 100%. And that acclimatisation day, that was when I experienced my first headache. Wasn't a bad headache, probably a little 2 out of 10, but just on the way up to that Everest View Hotel. But I must say as well, how blessed were we? We got up there and we set off reasonably early, and we had a bluebird day, and that's our first time that we get to see Mount Everest. And a beautiful hotel up there, beautiful cafe up there that we enjoyed an hour or two, and being able to see that view, and
it was epic.
Absolutely epic.
So I think out of the track, the Everest View Hotel was the best food I had in Nepal. Hands down.
Really?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, really. So great view. So we had Everest, Amadublam, and Lhotse right in front of you, all three in a row. Altitude sickness, I think the good bit is we were having Dimox, well and early. So Ramashup, we started having our Dimoxes regularly. So I didn't feel the altitude sickness at Everest View, or till that time I was perfectly fine. Thanks to Dimox.
it's just essential, isn't it? It's such good stuff.
It just probably points out just how important the weather is, because I remember as we were leaving, the clouds rolled over, just a very high level cloud, and you couldn't see those mountains. And then I remember that as we're trekking back down to Namche, there's all these trekkers on the way up, and they're going to climb. They're going to see anything.
Yeah, they've missed it, and that tends to happen sort of the later in the day you get. So it is really worth getting up early if you can swing it.
Yeah, all right. So then we're back, and that was one of our easier days as far as time went, because we were sort of back 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, enough time to head back into town, grab a massage
and some more drinks.
Hair of the dog.
That's it.
But then we're trekking the next day. That was from Namche to Pangboche, and that was another gain of around 500 metres. Is that right, Chip?
Yep. Yeah, that's about right. So it's another big day. And then we finish up at Mamacita's. So but you got something to look forward to. Yeah.
So walk us through, that was day 4.
That was a really good day, because I think we stopped at the monastery, if I'm not...
Yes.
Tengboche.
Tengboche,
Tengboche. I mean, it was a challenging day because altitude was there. But I remember us having that coffee and looking at I think you and I sat on that table, had a drink, and just looked at the vista, and it was just a memorable...
the views are really beautiful along that particular section of the trail. Yeah.
100%. And we should chat about with the trail too. Like the trail was exceptionally busy, and there was a lot of yaks coming down, a lot of donkeys coming down, a lot of other people coming down, which just added to, again, the experience.
Absolutely. I think, when I was leaving, I never had in my mind that how busy the track could actually get. I never, fathomed how busy it was. But I think along the way, the whole way through, there was a barge of people coming towards you, with you. And as you said, the donkeys, the jockey and the yaks, it was an unending, it was never a quiet moment on the track. But again, it's all a part of the experience. So, but it was a challenging day.
Yeah, I think that gets back to like how much you're at the mercy of the weather too, because the trail was so busy in that particular time because everyone had been at the mercy of the same thing we were, which they couldn't get that flight out of Lukla. So then you had all these people sort of coming in on choppers on the day that we did, and that's why the trail filled up so much. So again, it's the weather gods, man. It's all about the weather gods.
How did you find day 4, Deeps?
Okay, so look, it was I had a very simple philosophy. I stopped looking up at the mountains. I just was looking 3 steps ahead, and just had a breathing pattern going. I had a mental rhythm going, and I just like Harmon said, you don't have to be at the front of the pack. So we were at the back of the pack most of the time.
Yeah, well, you were quite good at really going up and down the line, I thought, Deeps. And Earl, another fella on our track, remarked on that too. Like you were really mixing it up. So
that was purely because of the rhythm. Like sometimes my rhythm just allowed me to go a little bit further up, and then a lot of the times I just wanted to hang back with Magnus, Harmon, and just others, just to have a chat and just be that supportive person as well.
Yeah. But that I agree. I think all along the track, not just one day. Deepan was one person. He was checking on pretty much everyone, how people were going. If somebody was slow, he was falling back, having a bit of a chat to them, pushing them along. So it brings out the best in people, when somebody's trying to support you and encourage you. So good on you, Deeps.
Thanks, mate.
Such a legend, mate.
Absolutely.
Checks in the mail.
Checks in the mail.
Absolutely.
But I think this is, honestly, I think all of us had that same ethos on this trip. It wasn't just one, it was all of us. And that's actually what made our trip the most memorable. It's the vista, the people, the experience. I think we
the drinks,
the drinks,
massages,
the tracking massages. If there's one person that sniffed out a tracking massage, it's my man here, H.
Well done.
To clarify though, boys, the drinks were Namchi, and the last massage on the actual trek was Dingbo Shay. Yeah. Okay. So there was one more that you sniffed out.
Was that at the hospital?
Yeah.
They didn't usually do it, but Harmon's just.
It was called the Altitude Spa. So they actually had an Altitude Spa at Namchi, and
it's a franchise.
Yeah, it is a franchise. So
Harmon's listing and presentation skills were shining, mate.
We'll include that link in the show notes.
That's it.
So Dingbo Shay, that brings us to day 5. So we're up Pangbo Shay, and then we're off to Dingbo Shay, which is another 500 odd metres, bringing us up to around 4,500 metres that day. And if that was a very memorable day for me, because the trail really opened up. It was quite expansive. We had a big gorge on one side. We basically had another bluebird day. So we had the mountains in the foreground almost the entire day, and there was no having to move off the side of the track for other trekkers or any of the animals. And so I thoroughly enjoyed that. Would have been probably my favourite day. How did you guys find that?
I think, as you rightly said, after 4,000 metres, the landscape really starts to change. So the tree lines really started to change, and that I agree with you, Mag. That was a day when you had just open plains that we were walking on, no trees, if you remember. But again, a lot easier walk. Yes, it was long, but then really enjoyed the walk. But we came across Dublin. We could see the Dublin Base Camp. So from where we were, when we had that cup of tea, we were right under the Dublin Base Camp. But that was a really good day in terms of walking. It wasn't too treacherous.
Yeah. You on that day you pass what they call the tree line, which is where the air gets too thin. There's not enough oxygen there for actual trees to grow, so you're just getting those low grasses and juniper. So much juniper, and it really is a line. It's really interesting to see because it doesn't fade out. It just stops. The trees just stop, and then you've just got that grass and juniper. So it's really cool. But the scenery is still beautiful, boys. Would you agree with that? Still beautiful
100%.
scenery, but it's much more severe. It's got that austere beauty, like a Russian woman.
But it's still untouched nature. You know what I mean? It's still untouched nature. It's a land. It's sites you really wouldn't see here in Australia, basically.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it's something very different to what we're used to seeing around here.
It's like you said, Ship, there was this definitive line. You could see it on the hillside that the trees just stopped. That was a gorgeous little place that we had lunch. Right next to that running water, there was that gorge and the stream running down, the noise of the water and the mountains in the foreground. That was an epic little spot for lunch.
And a nice big herd of yaks just outside too. So you're getting the full Nepali experience in that spot. It was really cool.
Yeah, because yaks basically start after 4,000.
Yeah, high altitude animals.
High altitude animals only. So that's when the herds really came out.
Yeah, because the yak herders were driving them, just giving them the morning exercise. It was really cool.
So Dingboche is where we had another acclimatisation day. So we knew we were actually in that accommodation for 2 nights.
Yep.
And so let's have a walk through that. We're now at 4,000 metres and actually 4,500 metres, and we've got that acclimatisation day. So did any effects of that altitude start kicking in for anyone yet?
For me, it's pretty reliably, because I've done it twice now, it's pretty reliably the 4,000 metre mark. I really start to feel it. So I was certainly feeling it. And again, it's just a touch of breathlessness. Just things are a little bit more difficult. And some people describe a difficulty sleeping. I didn't get that. I find it's actually easier for me to sleep at the higher altitude. So I suppose there's some individual variability there. But certainly you are like... I think unless you're actually a Sherpa or something, you're definitely feeling the altitude by Dingboche.
I think based on, where we come from, what our daily routines are, definitely we start to feel the altitude sickness. For me, it was primarily lack of sleep. The last, I think from day 4 to 8, I had practically 2.5 hours to 3 hours sleep. And I was waking up on regular intervals, but that was... that was till Dingboche, that was the issue. But breathing was okay, but I was just a little bit slow in walking. Apart from that, it was okay.
Yeah, didn't that pace drop off? I
did. Yes.
I was fair struggling at that time. My little cold had turned into a bit of a chest infection, and I was suffering. And I remember too, obviously the accommodations they're not exactly the Hyatt. And so the walls being paper thin and you could hear every step, and, if your roommate happened to be a snorer, well, that was just a little bit of too bad. And there was obviously some other groups that wanted to have an early start. So they're up at 4 a.m., a group of 12 people, and there's plenty of noise. And, sleep deprivation was certainly a very, very real thing. But then that following morning, we wake up. Can anybody remember what we were surprised to see outside that morning?
Snow. Yeah, it was snowing when we came out.
Yeah, for our departure from Dingboche, it was snowing, and this beautiful big black mountain dog came down too. So it was just a photo op morning. Cold as hell though. Cold. It's a bit too cold even for me.
But it was the first day when it actually started snowing, and when he came out, everything was nearly white. I was like, yes.
Welcome.
That's the experience we came here for.
Oh, there you go. Good. Good on you.
Agreed. And we still had one of our group members that still had shorts on.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you got to go a long way before putting your slacks on, won't you? There was a fella though. He had he was in another group. I think he might have been one of the guys. Did you see him? He was wearing shorts all the way to base camp. Did you see that fella?
Such a show off.
Yeah.
Probably from Victoria. What about you, Deeps? How were you feeling that altitude, and how did you cope with that acclimatisation day?
Mate, that would have been probably the highlight where the real toughness of the climb actually kicked in. And I think it was more the compounding effect. I mean, the adrenaline and the excitement and all of that, day 1 to day 4, got the body to that point. But the real compounding effect of day 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, that's where it started catching up. I think the colder it got and the lack of sleep really started testing the physicality and the mental toughness. But again, it's this group that we had, the camaraderie, the encouragement, and then just that rhythm in the head to just keep going. And I remember we got to a certain point, and then some of our guys decided to go back, and then some of us actually went a little bit further as well. And I think that was a point where we were saying, welcome to Everest. I mean, this is where the real climb starts, so day 4 onwards.
Yeah, that's a very good point you brought up, Deepan. And I think it's that compounding effect that makes this as challenging as what it is. It's not just doing something for a day, but everything's getting slowly harder and harder. You're getting that less sleep. Nutrition we might talk about a little bit later. But so I think for memory, part of the group, we got up to 250 metres that we climbed that morning, and then I think you boys made it up to 450 metres, and you could literally go as high as you wanted. And that hillside that we climbed up, which straight up, was very directly steep behind our hotel and was very steep.
It was a memorable moment. I think we did a clip for Chip's video where he had some actors and he gave us some script lines and some sword fighting. So hopefully
choreography.
We'll see that in your video.
Oh, boys, that's coming up. Don't you worry. It's going to be a cracker.
And it was also good. We met a lot of Aussies on that particular mountain as well. And
from Darwin.
Harmon and I were sort of, Harmon and I were getting that massage withdrawal symptoms, and there happened to be 3 girls behind each other. One was massaging, the other one was massaging, and the third one wasn't getting a massage. So we were thinking, should we just jump on that train and start rotating this?
You've had enough experience by then in terms of massages.
That was probably our shortest day too. So that was all over pretty much at about lunchtime. And then we had the afternoon off. And I recall walking down into the town and found this most amazing cafe that was absolutely heaving with people, awesome coffee, and just a fantastic atmosphere. And I think you guys spent a few hours down there.
Spent a few hours and a few coffees. It was a great afternoon. Deej and I, we posted up for 3-4 hours, didn't we?
I was just so happy to be in a...
Jeeps was really happy that they offer free phone charging there, because at the hotel it was 500 to 700 rupees to get your phone charged, and the cafe was charging nothing. So it was like, Jeeps was like, coffees and phone charging. And a great atmosphere.
And they had the best desserts there. I think we smashed quite a few of those bounty and cheesecakes and...
Yeah, because they really love like some baked goods in Nepal, but the quality is definitely variable. So when you find a good spot, and cafe, what was it,
884A.
So that cafe, that's some of the best stuff you're going to find on the trail. Try the bounty slice is what Deep and I tell you.
And straight after the cafe, I had to the massage at the base hospital. It was great. The fun bit was in the middle. The power, there was a power outage, and there was no heating. It was something like -3 degrees. And I was like shivering, trying to get a massage. I was like, why am I doing this really? I know I'm tired, but still, I could be doing better things.
Get a hot ramen here, you'll be fine.
And then early start the next day, and we're obviously starting to really climb up, and we're off to Loboshay. So how did we find that day?
Oh, let me begin, because I always knew that this was going to be my toughest day. And it absolutely did not disappoint, because you're at altitude here, and now we've got from Tukla, the little tiny village of Tukla, you've got a very steep ascent. Depending on how quickly you take it, you could do it in half an hour, or it could take you an hour. With that altitude compounding the difficulty, that for me was always going to be the toughest day, and it really, really was. And I just slugged through it and got it done quickly. Still took me 35 minutes, and that was 35 minutes of pretty substantial, like say it's 35 minutes of a tough jog uphill is how that felt.
Yeah, I think
when you're just walking.
I think it might have taken me nearly an hour and a half. I was suffering, and with that altitude, and that was, I think, I was partnered up there a little bit with John, and we just focused on 30 steps, and then we'd stop and have a rest, and it was a fair old climb, and suffering definitely. How'd you guys find it?
That was my hardest day. It's definitely one of my hardest days that I had. I saw you started to slow down as well, but at the start I was at a decent pace. But then the heavy breathing had started to kick in around Thukla when we kind of got to that stage, and we sat down for lunch. That's when it literally slapped me in the face, and I did think of actually jumping on a pony and going up, but then I said to myself, no. I've trained for this. I can't do this. I have to walk and get to the base camp. So I have to do this sort of myself. But the sickness had really started to kick in at that stage.
Yeah, it was an interesting place to have lunch, wasn't it? Because we sat there and basically stared at this dirty, great big hill that we knew that's next.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you reckon that incline was?
I wouldn't hate to guess. It was steep though, wasn't it?
Yeah, very. I mean, when you're on it, it feels like 45 degrees at least.
What about you, Deeps? How was that day for you?
Like Harmon said, it was a very, very tough day. I was a little bit blessed where I didn't have that headache. I didn't get that altitude sickness. That Dimox really worked. I was very conscious on drinking enough water and being sort of next to Magnus, who was gulping down 5 litres of water. It sort of forced me to keep up with him. Not at that level, but that water did certainly help. And then, honestly, it was just that rhythm and that breathing, and I was in my mojo, whatever the word is, and fortunately not having that altitude sickness just allowed me to just keep soldiering on.
Yeah, it's probably worth mentioning just how important that fluid intake is, in particular to one, avoid altitude sickness, but you obviously dehydrate. You got any comments on that, Chip?
Yeah, I think if you want to be very safe, it's probably a good idea to have, say, 3 litres on you on any one day for the actual trekking, and then you'd want to still try to take in about another litre besides. Sort of at the end of the day. I think that's a good way to do it, because you really want to limit the weight of your day pack as much as you can, because obviously the heavier that pack, the tougher the trek's going to be. And the trek's tough enough,
Absolutely. So then we're in Lobochet, and we're at, what's that, 4,900?
Yeah, 4,900 roundabouts.
4,900. So, the sleep for me got even worse, and obviously it got even colder. Obviously, the higher up we're climbing, the colder it got. So, how was that? Just that cold? What sort of effect did that have on you guys?
Oh, the sleeping was terrible. I mean, you had 5 layers of clothes. You had the beanie on, you had the gloves, you had the socks. Every time you wanted to take a piss, it was a process in itself.
I think you had your balaclava on at one stage too.
Well, when you got our heads, man, what do you do, man? But
that's fun. It's probably worth clarifying too that you guys aren't brothers.
No, we're twins. We're the identical twins.
Same mums, different dads.
Yeah, I did. Like Lobochet, definitely for me, both times has been the coldest village. I reckon, because you get to Gorakshep, which is that little bit high, but for whatever reason, I found that to be a bit warmer. I don't know. Maybe it just sort of warmed up by the
part
trek.
of the valley. It is. It's just a colder part of the valley.
Yeah. So I mean, that would be my quiet word of warning to anyone. Lobochet is the one. That's going to be the cold one. That's when you're going to have to rug up.
It was really cold, and I think by the time we got to Lobochet, the sleeplessness every day had started to compound. So like 3 to 4 days of not getting decent sleep, the body had started to feel the effect really, because you really need to recover in order to hit hard the next day. And all the 8 days, I don't think we had a single day which was, a bit we could just laze around. So, but it was starting to get cold. The body was starting to feel it, and breathing definitely was getting heavier. A part of it also, I think, our lodging, boarding, but the lodges were very, very humble lodges, so they weren't the best accommodation. It's very, you can
Very basic.
Yeah, you can literally hear the person in the next room breathe. It's like that. Do you remember both of us were in the room? We could hear every word Deepan was saying on the phone to his parents. I was like, yep. So, the commotion starts early, and just, you really can't sleep.
Well, that's obviously the end of day 7 when we've arrived at Loboshay. And then we also know that day 8, all things going according to plan, we'll hit base camp. But that is an early start, isn't it? I think we were up at 4 a.m. Up at 3:30 and we're hiking at 4 a.m. And that was cold. That morning.
It was cold.
It was pitch dark when we left.
Yeah. But it'd be the coldest part of the day too, sort of right before dawn there. And then you're walking in. What do you reckon, boys? Probably about an hour of darkness, 90 minutes of darkness?
An hour and a half of darkness.
You reckon 90? You reckon 90? Yeah.
And I also recall then one of our team members who'd bought himself a pair of gloves, I think, in Kathmandu, ended up with 2 right-handed gloves.
Earl had some hilarious bad luck with stuff like that.
So out of all of us, talk about suffering and having poor old Earl with 2 right-handed gloves was
No, I remember one of our Sherpas, Dilip. He said to me he didn't have gloves, so I had the mitts. I took my mitts off and I gave them to him, and I just had one pair myself. But then shit's getting real, when we left, was it Loboshay? It was like nearly -10 in the morning.
That cold,
and
It was freezing.
I could actually feel it. I was like, but yeah, that, and Earl was the classic. We chucked those gloves on him and I got some duct tape and I just taped the glove on him. He was like, yeah, this won't move. You'll be okay.
And a lot of that walk is in that valley. So the sun started to come up, and yet we didn't actually get to see the sun or feel any of that sunlight until once we've gotten up over the top of that ridge. And then we've landed in Gorashep and we've had breakfast. So what time did we get there? 7:30?
No.
About 8:39.
Nearly 9, 8:45.
Oh, no wonder I was hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the views were just absolutely spectacular. When you're walking through the valley and the sun comes up and you're just walking through snow-clad mountains, it was absolutely just surreal. It's beautiful.
It was absolutely epic, and I was not game enough to take my gloves off to take a photo. So hopefully I got some footage of that for us, Chip.
Yeah, mate, I did, but I feel your pain. I had to force myself to take my gloves off, and it was my job to run that camera. I was going, can I get away with it? No. Take some photos.
Because on top of that first ridge, I think you took off with one of the guides and made your way. You probably got to Gorashep at about 6:30, didn't you?
I think it was close to 7.
Wow.
Just to be modest. No, well, we had to, because again it was busy that day. So Gyal Jeng was our guide's name there, and he wanted to make sure that we get some beds because these places are filling up so fast, and sometimes they might not honour your booking. Let's say, so we had to get there and just make sure. Crack down on that because otherwise we might have been sleeping in the common room. Which is
there was a
not
fair few
ideal.
people sleeping there.
Yeah,
when we left in the
exactly.
morning, there was heaps of people sleeping there.
Yeah, so it can get a bit wild westy up there,
Well, one of the girls that we met, the French one, actually had to tent it outside the lodge.
Yeah.
Imagine how cold that tent would have been.
I know, yeah. Well, because these lodges are fairly recent. I think it's sort of only been happening since about 2015 that they built all these lodges. So before that, it was like the EBC trail was just mostly camping.
Yes.
How was the altitude starting to affect you guys then?
I think you almost just accepted it. You became a bit numb to it. It is what it was.
Yeah.
But I must say, look, just taking a step back, you mentioned Earl and his challenges, but Earl never gave up. You were sick from day one, at the aeroplane at the Brisbane airport, but you never gave up. John had some real bad gastro problems. He was on the floor in a fetal position, couldn't get out of the toilet, and he
was out for 3 days.
Yeah,
2 days.
Yeah, but and then a day's trek to catch up with us on a horse.
But imagine, the mindset of someone whose stomach was that bad, and then just going on a donkey,
a full
man.
day on this tiny little mountain pony. Spare a thought for the tiny little mountain
Exactly.
pony. John's a big fella.
Exactly. So again, it just showed the resilience of the members in our team.
Resilience is probably the word that comes to mind, because it was just everybody started to really suffer, and that whole mind over matter had to kick in.
But we all knew that the destination was to reach base camp. We all invested not only financially, but the 6 months preparation or 3 months intense preparation. So we weren't going to give up. The destination was always to get to base camp. And even Joe, after that monkey temple, we were all doubting whether Joe would even make day one on the track. And
she dark horsed us.
She hustled us.
She told me at the end, the only reason she didn't go up because she didn't like monkeys. It wasn't about climbing up. Yeah. So she said monkeys really creep her out. And when she got there, she saw too many of them. She was like, no, I can't do this.
Yeah, it's covered.
So,
I mean, it's veritably gate-kept by monkeys. Yeah.
So we had breakfast in Goreshep. We were obviously all fairly hungry after trekking for a number of hours on an empty stomach. And then one of our team members fell ill to altitude sickness, and we lost him, and he was airlifted out.
He was actually mentioning that he's had some nervous problems in his foot in the past, and they were starting to flare up. So, yeah, he was flown from Goreshep. Bit of a shame that, coming so close to base camp, but he still couldn't do it. So, but...
Yeah, he was suffering with some sleep deprivation that day too, because I was rooming with him, and I think he was up since like midnight, and then just couldn't get back to sleep till we got back up again,
It's one of the symptoms, though, isn't it, that as that altitude sickness really starts to creep in, that does affect sleep.
100%.
Absolutely.
All right, and then we made our decision, let's do it. And so it was 10:30, and we set off to base camp. And that was, I think, only about 3 kilometres in distance each way, 3-4 kilometres. Would that be right, Chip?
Yeah, closer to 4.
Close to 4.
But it's still a couple of hours.
But I remember we were having second thoughts if we were going to do it the next day, but we decided that we were going to do base camp and come back to Goreshep. So technically, it was nearly another 7 to 8 k's that we had to walk. For
the round trip.
Round trip.
Yeah, we decided to do it and just soldier on.
Yeah, that was quite rocky too, wasn't it? And again,
very rocky.
Put it in perspective, I think Goreshep is 5,200 metres, and then base camp's 5,480.
5,564.
Yeah. So, how high is it, Chip?
I thought it was 5,480.
Yeah, I thought 5,480 too, but and that was a fairly hectic track as well. There was a lot of people on the track, both heading to base camp, and because of our lateness in setting off, there was a few people coming the other way too.
Yeah, and like most of that track too, and we should alert people of this, like the way from Goreshep to base camp is kind of undulating, so you're going to be going up and down. So there's, people get this idea in their head that there's sort of a climb and then it's all a descent, but it's not. You're going up and over hills, all the way there and all the way back.
And I remember when we were on our way to Goreshep, the weather had started to change. So if you remember, the clouds were really coming in, and we were thinking if we'd actually be able to see anything when we got to base camp. But luckily, I think that the weather gods were kind to us that day.
Yeah.
One more time.
Yeah, it was another really lovely clear day.
Yeah. Apart from that first day, we're trekking in the rain and in the dark, and then after that, every other day was almost a bluebird day. Like we had some really nice sunshine, a lot of clarity, being able to see the mountains on the majority of our trekking. And so then we arrive finally at base camp. What were your thoughts? So what were your feelings when we finally got there and we're standing next to that big rock along with all of our other fellow trekkers, because that was fairly busy there. I remember too, wasn't it?
It was a busy day.
Exactly. So just to get, you could see that big rock with spray painting on it from a distance. And I was like, wow. But there was like 100 people in a line waiting to get a photo there. So, but I think it's the when you start seeing the Khumbu Glacier when you're walking from Gorakshep onwards, it is massive. It's huge. It's like a few kilometers of like an absolute glacier. And I think I was just enjoying the views there, absolutely loving the views, because you will not see this anywhere else in the world, let's face it. And it just made me forget the altitude sickness. It just makes you forget everything when you're seeing, you're seeing those sights. But when you could see base camp, it was like, yes, we finally made it, because a few times I had it and I was like, am I actually going to do it or not? I was soldiering on. I was being resilient. I was very, very happy that I'm here. Let me take a photo and just show everyone that I've finally done it.
What were your feelings, Deeps, when we finally arrived at the rock?
Yeah, look, I think, just from the start to getting to that point, the vista, the mountains, the rivers, the bridges we crossed, all the views were amazing. My only thing is probably I didn't do enough research to understand how many base camps there were. And from my understanding, that's just one base camp or 4 base camps. Yeah. And when you're looking at Everest was actually behind a couple of mountains. So you saw that tip of Everest.
She's framed.
So in my head, I thought that rock was going to be behind the full Everest.
Ah, yeah, there you go.
That's what I had in my head. It wasn't disappointing or anything. It was just probably not doing enough research, and then the expectation. Well, I'm at base camp, but I literally got to get my binoculars to see that little tip of Everest. But I think that's where the next day we were looking to go to that Kalapata, which should have given us a different vista of.
That's the absolute stunning
Of
shot of
Everest.
Everest and Kalapata. Yeah, I will say, and a lot of people do. I mean, it speaks to really trying to get as much as you can out of the journey, because I mean,
It's all the
the
journey.
base camp rock is it's a big rock.
It's
big
a
rock
destination.
with,
That's all it
with
is.
spray paint on it. So, and you can get some really nice photos there. But I would say that there are definitely, even in terms of just photo ops, there are nicer spots all along that trail. It's a wonderful goal to get to, and it's a really good sort of feather in the cap. But yeah, at the end of the day, she's a big rock.
So, Chip, being your second time, and obviously you're only just there in April of this year, if we could point out. So, once you've arrived at the rock for the second time, what were your feelings and thoughts?
A lot busier was the initial impression, and then it was just really nice. It was sort of a feeling, that nice little feeling of deja vu you get when you've come back to a place that's got a lot of meaning to you, because I mean the first trek I did, it was really wonderful for me. I really enjoyed it and I got a lot out of it, and so it felt, it sounds kind of contrived to say, but it is you get a little feeling of not coming home, but that frisson of familiarity.
What about relief? Is that something that you guys? I know that was one of the feelings that I've had. Just this sense of relief that you'd really belted yourself a fair bit, and it's like, wow, I'm actually here. It was a little bit surreal for me.
It's like anything, you want to achieve a milestone. You set yourself a goal, and you get to that goal, and you take a deep breath, and you say, well, now I've reached that goal, and that is that relief that you've achieved. You had a destination in mind, you had an action plan, you prepared for it, you got there, and it's that celebration and relief, as you said.
Exactly. And so we were all suffering to a degree, but there was, so poor old Cam, he got airlifted out before we set off for the final trek to base camp. But then there was 3 other members that were really suffering.
So Earl, basically from Gorakshep, he got a horse and he came to base camp on the horse, but at least he wanted to be there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
because his knee, he had altitude issues, there were some fitness issues, but his knee was very much griefing him by then. So joint issues, obviously, when you're walking for 8 days, can be a real problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think he had a knee brace on from day 2, didn't he?
Yeah.
And poor Earl, I don't know what happened to his track poles. And so he had all these issues, and then he didn't have his tracking poles. So
Yeah.
I gave him one of my track poles, and he just sort of
Hobbled along. He
got to
got
that
there,
point.
though. Again, it speaks of that perseverance, that resilience. You know,
100%.
he had to get a horse. He had to get a horse to that last stretch, but he got there. And then we should mention too that then he had to wait for a horse on the way back, and he was waiting for hours. I had begun to worry. Where is Earl?
And it was cold.
Go down.
It was cold for him as well because he still had the issue where his hand was still 3/4 frozen.
Yeah, he still had his two right gloves.
If I'm not mistaken, Joe took his horse back.
Yeah, we should hasten to add that was she didn't know. You know,
No,
she didn't know.
She didn't know.
Yeah, it turned out that Joe stole his horse.
But I must say,
horse rustling on that trip.
Harmon did all of us a favour. He cut a deal with a bunch of horses and their owners, and we cut a deal back to horsing it. At least the
Back to
three of us,
Gorshap.
Earl.
The
And
joys
Joe?
of being multilingual.
Yeah, yeah, and we were suggesting too, because John was, I would say, probably suffering the most by then, and he did walk from Gorshap, made it all the way to base camp, and then I remember at one point he said, I'll try to get a chopper just out of base camp. And we said, choppers don't go to base camp. Sorry, Johnny, you're going to have to get a horse. And because he'd had that full day on the horse earlier in the trek, he could not face it. So he just went, I'll walk out. And he did. And I walked with him, make sure he's all right. But it took us 2.5 hours. What would take you probably just an hour at a normal pace took us 2.5 hours. But his son Archie was with us. Dilip, our guide, was with us, and we just took it easy. And he got all the way back. I mean, you want to talk about resilience? That man. Johnny.
Yeah,
well
100%.
Well done, mate.
And having his how old was Archie? 13? 14?
Yeah.
And he was, I think, out of all the trekkers, he was probably one of the ones that suffered the least in behind Chip, who seemed to do it easy. But
I reckon he got me. I reckon Arch was definitely, in terms of fitness, in terms of how easily he was handling
I think
that.
he took the crown out of the whole group.
Yeah.
14 years old, but I was really impressed, and I told my kids when I got back home, I was like, mate, that's the kid you need to look up to. But he was so good during the whole trek, you know.
Yeah.
He was mixing
He's
with
got
all of
manners.
us as well. It wasn't like the baby of the group, but
had some great conversations with him, and but most of the time he was right up the very front, and I was up towards the back. So, but speaking of kids, remember that little 9-year-old that we bumped into?
6 mountains.
Ayan. So he's
Wow.
actually completing the 7 summits. That was his 4th one. I spoke to him and his dad, and I followed him on Insta. But that kid's he's already done 9 years old. He's done Australia's highest peak, Mount Kosciuszko, but he's done 6 other summits
Wow.
at 9 years of age. So he is aiming to do Mount Everest summit. So I was like, wow, that is impressive.
Right. Do they let 9-year-olds up there? Or how old's he going to be?
12, I
It was
think.
with his father.
He was with his father.
That's amazing.
Too much energy.
Yeah, you're making us look bad, man. What's his name?
Ayan.
Ayan. Wow, good on you, pal.
So then we make our way to Gorshap, and it's 3:00 in the afternoon, and that's when shit I think got really real, and the decision was made that 3 of our other members were in need of hospitalisation. So our guides organised helicopters, and the following morning, late morning, we all flew out, and those guys spent 2 days in Kathmandu hospital recovering. And
Yeah.
What a day to start my birthday, hey?
Hey, you got a chopper ride for your birthday?
Yeah, I know.
so how were you guys? Do you recall how you were feeling once we got back to Gorshap and we'd made it?
I think I had the same little chest infection that you had actually, Mag. So I had that a little bit. But aside from that, and I noticed this the last time too, often it really is just coming down from those high altitudes and you just start to feel better immediately. So I definitely felt that this time. Yeah, still had that cold. That took another day or so to go away. But yeah, you can kind of feel the energy coming back. You feel the breath coming back, obviously. And it's a really nice feeling. You feel lighter. In every way, you feel lighter.
That night, though, was probably the coldest. And because of the busyness. I know that I was probably one of the few that bought myself a -10 sleeping bag. So during the actual evenings, I was actually I was never once cold at nighttime. But I remember that a lot of the others, it was, we'll just go grab another doona. And unfortunately, there wasn't any more doonas, so you had no choice but to sleep in like you were saying, Deeps, in 4 layers. And so we get up the next morning and off we went.
Yeah, and we had 4 of us, so me, Chiring, Bernie and Archie. We also hiked down to Lobache, which is a lower village.
Oh, that's right.
An interesting thing because those choppers, they can't, up at Gorakshep, the air's too thin, so they can't take their full complement of passengers. So a few of us who were still able and up for it, we hiked down to the lower altitude. So then the chopper picks some people up at the higher one, comes down the lower altitude, picks us up and takes us on. Yeah. Which I just like. I think that's an interesting tidbit. I like that.
All right, so as far as challenges goes, I know we've touched on that. Have you got any specific ones that you can recall that you go, well, hey, these were probably my top 3 things that I struggled with personally?
The hill. the hill. Take it away. Can we get an escalator in there or something? Bloody hell. So I'd say definitely the hill. Just the breathlessness of altitude is the thing I struggle with the most. I find I need to keep a lid on how gassed I allow myself to get because, again, as mentioned earlier, you get too gassed and then it takes you too long to get that breath back. Because when I left base camp, I needed to catch up to John because he'd gone far ahead, and I took that hill straight out of base camp a bit too quickly, and I got to the top and I was just gasping. So I'm like, all right, you're not Superboy, mate. Let's just calm this down and walk slowly. Yeah. But it took a good. I mean, you usually get your breath back in a couple of minutes. It took me 5-10. So it's the altitude's very confronting that way. I think specifically this one too. I did have that chest infection that I think you had as well, and so that just for the one day, it did just take a bit of joy out of the day, which was a bit of a shame because it's never any fun to be sick. So those are my 3 big ones.
Yeah, for me, it was effective altitude sickness was lack of sleep, and then the bronchitis really kicked in. So chest infection, just like you guys, but mine has still lingered on. So it's nearly a month since we completed it, and I still have it.
Improving? Improving,
yes. Yeah. I had recovered, but then, and it just came back, unfortunately. But apart from that, these were my main. Physically, I'm glad I was okay till the end. The training and the nutrition advice that I got helped heaps. So, and I'm really trying that I still try and keep up, with that regime, even though there's, we're not going another trek again, and which is one of the reasons I want to go with you to our next adventure in June. So just still keep, the regime on.
Absolutely. How about you, Deeps?
I'm just going to mirror the commonality of what's been said. I mean, altitude is a common thing that we all dealt with. Lack of sleep after day 4, it was prevalent. It's just cold. Walls were paper thin. You could hear everyone above you, below you, either side.
In the next building.
In the next building as well.
The whole village.
Food-wise, I'd accepted that the food was going to be vegetarian, and so look, it was ordinary. It was basic. It was the same menu. But mentally, I'd accepted that that's what it was until we got back to Kathmandu. So then we reset it. So food was okay, and just the cold. I mean, I'm not used to that level of cold. So putting on 4 or 5 layers, it's just, if you're talking about challenges, it's just the cold.
Yeah. For me, it was definitely being sick. That was probably the toughest part that I found. Followed very closely by nutrition. I'm very particular with my diet back home here, so having a complete shift in my diet, and then the last one was the altitude. But I was fortunate I didn't suffer from the extreme altitude sickness, a few headaches, but wasn't too bad. And then obviously that sleep deprivation, like you guys mentioned, that's, I think when you remove a bit of that nutrition and then you remove sleep and then you put someone at altitude is one of the reasons that it's such a tough expedition and not just a wander in the park. When you, like 2 nights we spent sleeping at over 5,000 metres, and there's not too many villages in the world where you have that opportunity. So standout memory. What would your standout memory be, Deeps?
Mate, it has to be the combination of all the different vistas that we saw. I mean, it's one of the few places in the world that you could see everything that we saw in one setting. So, yeah.
I think for me as well, it's not just one particular memory. It's the entire trip, really. You know, you go to these trips to gather memories and collect memories for a lifetime. But it was, you know, the entire experience. I'll definitely be cherishing this, you know, for a long time.
Yeah.
Mm. Can I do 2 standouts?
Yeah, mate, you can.
Okay. I'm going to be greedy. I would, anyone who's thinking of doing more than one trek, I can personally attest, I think that the adaptations you're going to get on that first one, even if there's a lot of months in between, I think they come back quickly. They seem to come back quickly for me. So I would, like, that's a bit of light at the end of the tunnel if you're struggling a bit and you still want to do so. And then I'm really going to say, this sounds a bit lame, but just the weather. We've spoken about the weather, how good it was, how clear it was, that you really got to appreciate what you were there for, which is the majesty of this, you know, this natural beauty. And the real, and sometimes the imposingness of it, like these big mountains. They make you feel small in a good way, you know, so those would be my 2.
Oh, mate, absolutely. And just to touch on that weather, like I watched a bunch of YouTube videos and the amount of other trekkers that were trekking in amongst when the cloud was low and it was quite gloomy, you can't see anything. And almost every single day we got to see those white cap mountains. The biggest standout for me is by far just the resilience. Like being in that group environment, there was 10 of us and all of us were suffering in various ways and none of us gave up. Like even Cam, who got airlifted out, he didn't want to get airlifted out. He was forced that, mate, you're getting put on a helicopter. Whereas all of us, just the resilience that we showed is just, it's something that I've not experienced to that degree by such a big group. So absolutely awesome. What didn't you expect? Chip? Probably not the best one for you, being your second trip, but even on your first one, for example, do you remember that when you arrived, you're doing the trek and you think, shit, I didn't expect that?
I didn't expect. Well, honestly, I just didn't expect us not to be able to get that window for the flight into Lukla from Ramachap, and then off the back of that, I really did not expect that first leg from Surkhe from Surkhe to be that challenging. That was a very challenging trek straight off the bat. Yeah. So it really did set the tone, I think.
It did set the tone because once we landed, the first bit of that trek is straight up a massive set of stairs.
Yeah. And also there was a fairly ungraded, very steep ascent. It was a short one, but it was it was very loose soil, so it was a little bit treacherous. So it really threw a few curveballs at us, that trek.
What about you, H?
One thing I didn't expect was the trek to be that busy. That was the first thing. But, you know, the food, I think I was a little bit over it in a few days. I was like, seriously, I need something more on the menu or something different on the menu. But these 2 really for me. Apart from that, I think I'd watched every possible documentary on EBC there was on YouTube or any other resource I could get my hands on. I was fairly well prepared. But yeah, these 2 things I didn't really, you know, count for.
Rightfully or wrongfully, I had the opposite strategy where I didn't watch too much, and I just actually went into this with no expectation. And I just said, I'm just going to take everything on board, the good, the bad, and the indifferent. But what I was told, which I was pleasantly didn't expect, is how clean the track was. I was expecting where people mentioned there's going to be a lot of litter and this, that, and the other. So the government there has actually done a lot to improve the the litter aspect of it.
Busyness for me, by far. That was something that in all of the things that I'd watched leading up to it, I was not anticipating that amount of people, and particularly actually at base camp, because obviously there are people from all around the world, so there's language barriers, and lining up going, hey, like we're trying to take a photo, and different people who don't speak English, and you just everybody's crowding around and everybody's jumping in trying to get their photo taken.
There's no number system at base camp, is there?
No. I remember you had a crack, or somebody had a crack at you as well.
Yeah, that was the only time on the trail that the busyness bothered me. Actually, was at base camp, because me personally, it wasn't a big deal on the trail. You know, the more the merrier.
Yeah, but on your first trip, Chip, like you guys arrived at base camp quite early, and you had the place to yourself. Is that right?
Mostly, there were a couple other groups, but yeah, it certainly was not at the level that it was at on this trip for sure.
All right. What about a favourite day? Was there a standout? Was there a day that you just enjoyed any more than the others, or?
For me, definitely the Dinboche acclimatisation day. You know, we had a good trip up the hill with these boys. Yeah. I got them to do a little lightsaber duel with the mountains in the background. That's going to make a hell of a video. And then we had a lovely little afternoon at the cafe. I mean, you can't do better than that. That was just a good day.
Yeah, I'd agree that was a memorable day. You know, just getting that proper acclimatization, just spending some quality time with you boys at that cafe for hours. It's just nice, man. It's just a warm setting as well, and it's just a nice reset point.
Yeah, the Aussie massage girls weren't too bad either.
Definitely a highlight, Chip.
Hello, honey. My wife will be watching this.
So for me, I think Namche was one of my favourite days, the acclimatisation day in Namche. So again, I think when we talk about spending quality time, we were doing that all through the 8 days. But that was definitely my favourite. Came back and then head out again to explore the little town of Namche. But definitely stands out.
My first soy cafe, I think we had a really nice coffee shop there. And couldn't find soy milk anywhere in Nepal, man. Except that particular cafe.
You can get some knack milk in your coffee.
Followed by a 2-hour massage, and then went to the Irish bar, a fair few tequilas.
You gotta do it. Isn't it funny too? There's an Irish bar in just about every Nepali village that you can find.
It had a proper vibe. I mean, it wasn't just they randomly called it an Irish bar.
It had
a proper vibe.
Exactly.
Was good.
Yeah. They love a reggae bar too over there in Nepal, don't they? A lot of Bob Marley on the trail.
Obviously, mine, Pangboche to Dingboche, only, again, just as I mentioned earlier, just because of the vista. I love water, and just tracking along the gorge where you've got that water running down and those mountains in the foreground, Bluebird Day, and followed very closely by actually the base camp trek, only I think from an achievement perspective, was awesome. So to close us off, what advice would you give anybody that's thinking about either a trek like this, or just thinking about doing something challenging or adventurous that's getting them out of their comfort zone? What would you say?
Look, from my perspective, probably a little bit more research, understand where you're going, understand the accommodation, understand what your goals are. Getting to summit at any place, is the important thing. And then I'll probably just look at getting a helicopter back to a destination, and then just reset. I
would definitely say that when you're going there, prepare yourself physically and mentally towards the goal that you're trying to achieve. So your physical fitness is of paramount importance to be able to actually get there. So if I hadn't prepared, or if I hadn't been eating well, or my nutritionist, my dietitian, Amrit, if he hadn't guided me, I don't think I would have done it. I was not in a position physically to do it. So for me, that's paramount. But again, understanding where you're going, what to expect, always makes your journey and your experience a lot better.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think the most important piece is prep yourself mentally. And for any adventure, quote unquote adventure trip, this holds true, but certainly specifically for the Everest Base Camp trek. I think you've heard it. We talk about the compounding effects. You're going to have an accumulation of discomforts on any adventure trek, particularly on this one. So you're going to get the altitude, you're going to get the cold, you might get a chest infection. Food's not great. There are nice-ish places to stay. I've checked them out. There's not a big difference. There really isn't a big difference in accommodation. And you will come to a point on the trail where there's just not any particularly nice place to stay. You're looking at dormitory-like accommodation, right? So all of these things are going to build up. Now, one by itself, they're all fairly slight insults as far as that goes, but they will accumulate. And so I'd urge people, mentally prepare yourself for the accumulation of those things, because if anything beats you, it's going to be that. And then, of course, you do need a base level of fitness. I think people look at EBC and they say, 98% completion rate, and it gets described as a moderate one. It is a moderate trek, but keep in mind, treks are difficult.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you, Chip. I think that preparation is the key, mentally, physically, and doing a little bit of research to know what you expect. And probably one of the other real, again, highlights for me would be our group. So we were so fortunate with the group that we had, the camaraderie we had within the group, the support within the group was absolutely amazing. So I think just also understanding the group that you're going with. So if you're thinking about doing a trek alone, well, what sort of group am I going with? But yeah.
100% agree, Mag. And when I actually spoke to Deepan, when I said I want to go to Everest, when the conversation started, and that's one thing Deepan said that resonates with, what you've just said, is you want to go with people with a good support group and people that you know. And after I've done the trek, I'm ready to sign that with my blood. I did the right thing. So if it hadn't been, you guys or the people that I knew, it would not have been a walk in the park. It would have been very different.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming in, boys. Been a great conversation and great to catch up again, and looking forward to the next one. So, we got the kayaking adventure with M26 up in the Whitsundays, and there's even Deep's got a few conversations starting to happen around Kilimanjaro. So,
love to do that.
The big fella.
So, thanks again, guys. Much appreciate your time.
Thanks,
Magnus.
Pleasure.